Hello everyone, this is EGWwrites, the author and creator and voice of Lady Eilean. This audiobook video is a companion piece to the novel Lady Eilean, which is available to read for free at wattpad.com. You can find this book and a handful of others on my profile. To view that, please visit wattpad.com/EGWwrites. Two quick housekeeping notes before we get started. Number one, this book will contain adult content, so listener discretion is advised. Please use headphones or listen privately. Number two, I live in New York City, and as much as possible, will try to edit around city sounds like sirens, car alarms, shouting, traffic, and etc. But sometimes there is no avoiding it. My apartment is a little too small for a recording booth. Thank you for your patience. Now, grab a cup of coffee or tea, snuggle up, and let's read. Lady Eilean, Chapter 11. Walter was officially wed a few weeks later. It was a lovely late spring evening, and the great hall was thrown open to the elements. Only the smallest of fires crackled merrily in the grates, keeping off the slight chill that occasionally blew in to nip at cheeks and noses. Partygoers laughed and drank and embraced the festive mood. Even the counterfeit bride and groom joined in on the fun. It had been a clever trick by the priest, to wed them without truly marrying them. With a handful of sly word changes and a clever rearrangement of the vows, only a religious scholar could have noticed the deceit. Aside from the priest himself, there was no one of such character at Stormway. Miss Sterling, Walter's would-be bride, had married her true love a few hours before. With both Walter and Miss Sterling wed to their respective choices, they were more than able to laugh and drink and wink at each other as newlyweds ought. It was an amusing deception, one that me, Alex, and my brothers took great pride in. Walter and Bess planned to depart to the mainland within a few weeks. The ruse only had to last until then. According to my brother, preparations were well underway. Alex sat beside me at the head table, at the formal place added for him between me and Robert. As my father had explained while demanding the place setting, he was, after all, one of the family. Alex's thigh pressed against my own under the table, and it was hard to concentrate beyond the heat of his body radiating into my own. My hand itched to rest on his knee. It would be so easy to settle my fingers on his leg, the action hidden by the tablecloth. The days between Walter's wedding and this sham affair had been rife with stolen moments, a steady ratcheting up of the teasing and banter Alex and I often shared. There had been a shift in our intent. Our quick words and boastful grins translated into a new, secretive language. There was a tension in our exchanges that made my heart thrum and my mind trill. I lived for it, surviving between one conversation and the next by supping on the delight of each encounter. A feeling, urgent and hungry, twirled low in my abdomen. I was clueless, bumbling along, but I was having glorious fun. Alex's knee knocked against mine, and I bit my bottom lip to steady my heartbeat. Daringly, I did what I wanted and settled my palm over his thigh. Slowly turning toward me with a golden goblet in his hand and a knowing grin, Alex raised his drink. To the fairest offspring of Stormway. It is only by coincidence that you're a woman, too, he toasted. I am glad I came to visit, and I'm very glad that we are such good friends again. I smiled and raised my cup. To charmers from foreign soils who pretend to flatter me while spending the evening making moony eyes at my brother Timothy. That was a secret affair. He swore no one saw us. I laughed. Well, then to handsome gentlemen who know good company when they see it. I am, after all, such a captivating and charming person. I bowed my head toward him. And humble. For the first time in my life, I felt comfortable, unafraid to laugh or trade barbs. I found time and courage enough to walk out of endlessly tedious afternoons spent sitting with Mother to meet Alex in the kitchens. We'd eat hot buns straight from the ovens, laughing and taunting each other as hot icing dribbled down our chins. It had been months since I felt the pull of that old, oppressive fog. It wasn't so much that the world had flickered back into existence, but that I had been given a chance to be in the world at all. I felt myself blossom. Long dormant feelings of spirit, humor, defiance, and delight ignited in my chest. You seem happy tonight, Alex commented as I offered him a bright smile. I am, I said sincerely. Alex beamed over the rim of his wineglass. I am glad. How are we going to welcome dear Miss Sterling to the family? I'm fresh out of frogs, I'm afraid. Laughing loudly, I tried to drown my amusement with more drink. It only made me feel lighter and more tickled. Walter was so mad. It'd be worth it to find a fresh supply, if only to see if his face could turn that peculiar shade of purple again. Except tonight's marriage bed will go unused, Alex quipped. Quite. I dared to slide my eyes toward his. Our gazes caught with such intensity that the crowd and party around us seemed to fade into mist. The music vanished from the air, and laughter ceased mid-giggle. It was as if the night itself melted around us, a new void filled with sparkling starlight and tingling skin. There was no room for fog and nothingness here. Alex leaned toward me as if reeled in by a lure caught on my own ribs. As they had that night in the church, his eyes left mine and traveled south, settling on my lips. "Alex," I breathed, closing my eyes and savoring the heat that seemed to simmer between us. When I opened my eyes, he was staring at me, his look soft and endless. He shone with a brightness that bewitched me. I opened my mouth to say something, I know not what. What were words compared to the devotion writ plainly across his face? He kissed me. It was so public, so exposed. I should have been embarrassed, but shame was the last thing on my mind. Alex's lips were soft and warm against my own. It didn't feel at all like I thought it would. It was softer, squishier, braced by the hardness of his jaw and the scrape of his stubble. But it did feel like a destination, the obvious culmination of our glancing and teasing, as if everything until this moment had been a treasure map leading toward this inevitability. It felt right. My face flushed as his mouth opened against mine. I could taste the wine on the tip of his tongue as it brushed along my bottom lip. I let him in, giggling as he tickled the roof of my mouth. Alex pulled away, looking dazed. "Eilean," he said, whispering my name like an invocation. "I'm sorry if—" "No." I shook my head and reached to caress his cheek. The movement came from a place primal and innate in my body. I had worried about what to do, how to respond. My mind stepped out of the way, allowing my limbs to act. Finding confidence in this natural response, I pulled him toward me. This time, I kissed him. In an instant, I was no longer content with the length of his leg alongside my own. I needed to feel his body against me. The ornate wooden chairs impeded my feverish advancements. A loud burst of cheering went up around the hall, and I startled. We jumped apart. Looking around, we sagged in our chairs as we realized we were not the focus of the celebration. Everyone in the room had their backs to us, watching some spectacle in the center of the hall. I saw the opportunity. Rising on shaky knees, I pulled Alex from his seat. "Let's get away from the crowd, shall we?" It was a risky, stupid suggestion. My mind already made up. I would not wait around and give someone the chance to interrupt. Smiling wickedly, Alex grabbed our glasses and a fresh bottle of wine from the table. "Lead the way, mistress," he said. His voice was deep and strained. It was an effort not to run out of the room at full speed. Each step was controlled, torturous. We passed Robert as we exited the great hall. His eyes swept over the two of us, no doubt the very picture of guilt. My brother bowed as we passed, a gleam in his eyes. "Good night, sister, Lord Leslie," he said. His farewell was both a taunt and a congratulation. I let out a shaky sigh as my brother winked. Alex merely tugged me forward by the hand. Once in the hall, we took off in a run, chasing each other through the castle until we reached the chamber we knew no bride and groom would enter, the room we knew would go unchecked. We stumbled through the door in hysterics, pawing at each other, our embraces interspaced with kiss-smothered glee. His hands were hot and strong as they traversed the skin of my arms, my neck, my waist. I undid the buttons of his coat and vest. I pushed the garments off of his arms and pulled him close to me, and pulled him close, savoring the heat from his torso through my bodice. We tumbled onto the bed. I astonished myself with how willingly I pulled him on top of me. As I turned my head, allowing Alex the freedom to kiss me from neck to bust, I caught sight of our reflection in a mirror. I was brazen, the unladylike picture of a man astride me, his head nuzzling against my long, pale throat. My cheeks were flushed crimson and my lips swollen and glistening. I watched, amazed as my hands guided Alex's head lower until I felt the scorch of his lips and the scrape of his teeth against the swell of my breasts. My eyes fluttered at the sensation. Strange, rough sounds moaned out of me, sounds of delight. With a final, fleeting glance at my reflection, I pulled Alex up and centered his attentions on my mouth once again. Only the freezing air of the room could distract us from our fevered explorations of each other. No fire had been lit here for weeks, the servants well aware that Walter had moved out into a little cottage with Bess. Only when Alex and I were both shivering from cold and desire did we pull apart. After a smattering of quick kisses, Alex slid off of me and walked toward the fireplace. A stack of wood was still piled up in front of the grate. He coaxed a roaring fire into life. I sat up, propping myself on my elbows. I looked at my reflection once again. My hair was in utter disarray, and my skirts were up around my thighs. I kicked off my shoes, enjoying the scandal. "Staying a while?" Alex asked over his shoulder. "Aren't you?" I purred, entirely unsure of where I had gone. I still felt like me, still looked like me, but another creature controlled me. I had wholly surrendered to my passions. Alex turned and lazily untied his cravat. His eyes burned like the hot blue center of a powerful flame. He smiled a crooked, handsome grin. "I will stay for as long as my lady commands me." "Then come here," I demanded, suppressing a shiver at his intensity, at my want. Alex stopped toward me. When he reached the bed, he gripped me behind the knees and pulled me with a sharp tug so I sat on the edge of the mattress. He kissed me again, his hands gripping the base of my head, his tongue plunging deep into my mouth. A soft groan escaped me, echoing into him. My breasts strained against my bodice. Pulling him between my legs, I felt the blunt press of his arousal on my inner thigh. I moved my hands along his abdomen, seeking the open V of his loose shirt. I roamed inside, feeling the soft, springy hair that traveled from his waistband up across his broad chest. We were intertwined. There was no end and no beginning to our separate forms. "Eilean, Eilean," Alex muttered between kisses, his voice husky. "Alex," I sighed, nipping at his bottom lip. "Whatever do you want?" Laughing, the low rumble vibrating through my body, he gripped my chin and tilted my face toward his. He imparted a tender kiss. "Do you think your father will require you to stand soon?" he asked. What a question at a time like this. I grew instantly cold. "Do you?" "I don't know," I confessed, staring into his beautiful face. Worry gripped my stomach, so at odds with the demanding want. Refusing to lose myself to old despair, I pushed against the thought that I was nothing but a pawn. "Promise me, Eilean, that if he mentions you're standing and I've left, if I've gone home, promise me you'll write me. I won't let you be sold into unhappiness. Conspire with your brothers, with me. We will get you out of this. I'll kill whoever bids for you. I'll stand for you myself, if that would make you happy." Alex's eyes blazed with such intensity that my heartbeat doubled. "I promise," I whispered, pressing my lips against his, an answering fury that did not need words. Alex's embrace was ardent. His mouth and body moved against mine ferociously. My breathing was ragged, everything blurred. There was only me and him, the only two people in the entire world. Nothing else mattered except this, except us. I knew what I wanted. I was nervous, excited, alive with 1.5 million sensations. But I was not confused, and I was not ashamed. Others could no longer govern my life. I was no one's pawn. I would choose this. I would choose Alex. Everyone else could go to hell. Call it a conquest, a debasement. Call me unchaste, wanton. Maybe it was a liberation. Maybe it was freedom. The words hardly mattered. I tugged on Alex's shirt, pulling it from his breeches. In an instant it was off, thrown to the other side of the room. I ran my hands up and down the planes of his chest and back. The feel of his bare chest against the sharp rise and fall of my breasts as I gasped for breath was remarkable. The delicate skin was alive and tingling. His mouth pressed ardent kisses against my cheek and neck. I rocked against that hardness in my lap. Felt it press against a brightness, a needy, fiercely alive spot between my legs. Alex's hands floundered over my bodice. I undid the straight pins that held it to my stays. I leaned back, wiggling out of my top, pulling the tight sleeves off of my wrists. Between the two of us, it was quick work to discard the rest of my clothes. Only my chemise remained, the thin garment doing little to preserve my modesty. "Alex," I pleaded. My voice was raw. His eyes were dark, glazed over with his own incessant demand. He reached down, resting his hand on my ankle. I writhed against it, enjoying his grip, learning all the new thrills my body could produce. "You are sure?" he asked. I sat up, kissing him. "Yes." Even if no one ever knew, I would know. Offering myself to someone I trusted, I respected, I admired was enough. It could make whatever happened in the future worth it. Knowing that I had chosen, I had wanted. Alex's hand trailed up my leg, creeping up and over my stockings with remarkable tenderness. I inhaled sharply as he lazily rolled down the long silk hose, kissing my calves as he freed them. Then, gripping my upper thighs, he pushed my shift up and over my hips. Cool air hit me and I shivered. I stopped breathing when his fingers tenderly pressed against that brightness, that alive spot at the center of me. He looked up, asking again for permission. I gave it. Stars bloomed across my vision as he lightly circled around me, his fingers nimble and slick. Gradually, he pushed a finger inside me, then another. It was an effort to remember to breathe, to think, an effort to do anything but lay back and laugh at the pleasure of it, the magic of it. I gasped as Alex curled his fingers, stroking something deep and trembling inside of me. I wanted more. More him, more sensation. Alex motioned for me to scoot back onto the bed. I did so, my eyes never leaving his as he climbed up beside me. His thumb made lazy circles on that hungry center, timing the movement to the motions he solicited inside. I fell back, panting. I gripped the covers in my fists as the phenomena built and built. It made me wild. It made me alive. I rocked my hips against his hand, moving in a rhythm and pattern that seemed forged from the very depths of my being. I reached out to him, my nails digging into the top muscles of his forearms. A pressure expanded within me, incessant and demanding to be released. Alex leaned down, kissing me, stroking me, until I yelled out in surprise. Relief and dizziness flooded through my body, chilling me instantly. There was nothing in the world but the sound of my heavy exhales and the feel of Alex's lips on mine. I clawed at him, trying to pull him closer, to pull him so thoroughly against my body that we would meld. He laughed against my lips. Gradually, he removed his fingers, their absence a void that was dark and cold enough for heartache. More, I whimpered. Please, more. Alex kissed my neck, ran a trail of kisses from my chin down to the loose ties of my shift, before getting off the bed and removing the rest of his clothes. His boots, his socks, his breeches, they all took too long in their removal. I ripped off my shift and threw it. Cold air prickled across my skin, cold and something else, something feral as I beheld Alex in all his glory. He crawled back up onto the bed, bracing himself above me with one arm near my head. The other hand he returned to my core, dipping in and out of me playfully, teasing me. He hesitated, again asking if this is what I wanted. I arched my back, lifting my hips to meet his. I startled when I felt the blunt push of him at my entrance. Reaching down, curiosity overwhelming me, I wrapped my fingers around him. I delighted in the indescribable softness of his skin, the strength of its rigidity. Alex hissed, his eyes closing tight. Yes, I whispered into his ear, tugging on the earlobe with my teeth. The last coherent memory I had was his low laugh and the thrill of that void disappearing completely. The pressure and sensation was different from his fingers. It was more complete. Joined, bound by body and heart, we let the night take over. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the story. Subscribe to this channel and click the notification bell to be alerted when new chapters are updated. You can also follow me on Wattpad or Twitter at EGWwrites, where I will also share updates. As always, thank you for being a part of Eilean's journey. We are very glad that you're here. Until next time.